help you. So now I'd love to introduce our trainers today. We have Jessica Rivera, our Vice President of Human Resources, as well as Keisha Hansen, our Learning and Development Director. So you are in wonderful hands, and I'll give it over to you, ladies.
Thank you, Anna, and welcome everybody. Pleasure to be here with you today and talk about communications, quality conversations across generations. I do want to take a moment and do a shout out to Riverside County Workforce Development Center because they are, as Anna said, sponsoring this, and yet also they provide a no-cost HR hotline for you. And this hotline is something that we service here at California Employers Association. And if you find that you have questions or need some guidance around those areas listed below, hiring and firing, harassment prevention, employee handbooks, it covers a myriad of things that we can provide guidance to you. And we have a team of HR subject matter experts who take calls from thousands of employers a month. So we are here to serve you if you have questions so that you can have that peace of mind on HR, human resources compliance. And whether it's processes, whether it's people, whatever it is, we can give you a hand with that. And we also want to let you know that our organization, we do not have attorneys. We do not provide legal advice. What we do is we will provide you guidance, recommendations. As I mentioned, our seasoned experts in human resources have just a tremendous amount of knowledge and experience. And there aren't a whole lot of situations that they haven't come across, so they can provide you that guidance. But we aren't attorneys. If we find as we're speaking with you, working with you, that you have a need for legal counsel, we'll certainly let you know that also. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and just touch on who we are as an organization. And we are an organization that has been around, believe it or not, since 1937. And we have worked with California employers for since then, providing them with guidance, recommendations, as I mentioned before. But also, you know, we've had situations where an employer might need an investigation or they might need some assistance with some negotiations, whatever it might be. We're here to provide that peace of mind for you. And we keep the human in human resources. So when you call us, you will be connected to a live person. You will be speaking with a live person and not a bot, not a chat, not something trying to get you to press buttons. You're going to be speaking to a live person when you call us, and we will direct you to another live person to answer your question, your specific issue. So please take advantage of that hotline. So today we're excited to talk about generations. Oh my goodness, and conversations, communications amongst generations. And as you can see here, we're going to be just talking about some of the strengths, some of the things that we can do as individuals, as leaders, to improve that collaboration and hopefully get to better outcomes as a team. Also, we'll be talking about the active listening, and that's something we hear a lot, Keisha and I, when we do training. People don't really listen anymore. I just wish they don't hear what I'm saying. They don't understand what I'm saying, and it creates that friction. We'll also talk about a couple of scenarios that might be helpful too. How do I get myself out of a situation where maybe I made it oops, or maybe I'm on the other side of that oops? How do I handle myself? And then also ask you to commit to one actionable behavior, something that you can do as you reflect on the generations in the workplace and some of the challenges you may have encountered over time and maybe even today. So before we get started, this is anonymous. No one's going to know who you are or anything like that, but we'd like to just get a sense with the 5 generations in the workplace today, and even a potential 6 with Gen Alpha, which I'll talk about in a moment. Which generation do you fall in? Let me go ahead here and launch a poll. If you could answer that for us, we'd like to see what our mix here today is. Give me just a moment here. All right, I'm going to launch the poll. So the question is, which generation do you represent? Give you a moment or two to answer that. Okay. Good. Good. Hey, excellent. All right. Give you just another moment. Okay, here we go. Let's take a look. All right. Hopefully you can all see the results here. And as you can see, we don't have our traditionalists pre-1945 with us. They're only about 1% of the workforce, yet we still see them, and recently read about a lovely lady who is 100 years old that says she will continue to work until she can't work anymore, and she loves what she does. So they are still out there. Baby boomers, we know that we're only at about 15% of our baby boomers in the workforce, but over 65% are saying they're not going to retire for a while. They enjoy what they do. They want to work. They want to continue to work. So we don't have anybody in this group here. Generation X at 14%, and millennials with Gen Y, which makes sense because when you look at millennials, they are our largest generation right now in the workplace at 36%. Gen X is in the 31 percentile. So usually you'll see a lot of companies, they'll combine them both together, Gen X, Gen Y, and then they'll call them millennials, or they'll call Gen Y millennials too, or Gen X millennials. So with this poll here, you'll see that it makes sense when we think about the 30% for both of those, Gen Y, Gen X, that they are 64%, which represents the workplace. And then Gen Z at about 21%. Some of our current research shows they're getting close to 21% at about 18, but expected to be 25% before long of the workplace. So this reflects similar to what we see in the workplace and the research that we're seeing. So with that in mind, why we're here today. We're here because effective communications can really make a difference in the workplace. And when you're navigating generations in the workplace, we all come from different places. And with 5 generations working side by side for the first time in history, we continue to see this, and we're getting up to 6 until our traditionalists, our maturists, the pre-1945 aren't in the workplace anymore. We may even have 6 because our Gen Zs are starting to, our Gen Alpha, are starting to show up in the workplace in retail, fast food, because they're working now too. Also, it's interesting when you see that 72% of workers have experienced intergenerational conflict. And this is just as of last year. So when you keep that figure in mind, 72%, and then we think about 73% of mistakes in the workplace are as a result of miscommunication, then layer on top some of the generational, we have some opportunities to get better at having conversations, to be effective, to be able to work in an environment where we can truly collaborate. And then also you'll see 21% of companies are more likely to exceed their profitability goals or profitability results when they have age diverse teams. When you have that combination, that diversity of thought, experience, all of those things that add up to brilliance, to have that strong communication. And imagine what we could do with that if we could continue to increase that because of those quality conversations that we want to talk about today to help you navigate through that. And when we talk about generations, and we don't want to generalize because everyone's an individual. So when we say, okay, here's a generation, that's just the starting point. It's not a definition. You may find you may have people think one thing about one generation versus another, but you're going to find that we're all very unique in how we operate. We all bring some of the best of our generations. We are able to work with other generations. We do mentoring, reverse mentoring, but we can play in many different spaces as individuals. And so when we talk about them, we only talk about them from the point of when they were born and, where they're represented in the workplace too. But it's good to have a little bit of knowledge on, just some of the things that the generations have experienced. So when you think about, for example, it's a very small at 1%, traditionalists pre-1945, some of the way that they were shaped is things like the Great Depression, Cold War, rotary phones. Believe it or not, we were just talking earlier about landlines, and only 24% of people in the US have landlines now, and I finally was sharing with my colleagues that I let go of mine. I finally released my landline because all I was doing was getting spam calls. I'm not a traditionalist, just so you know, but as a boomer, yeah, I finally let go of that. But then you also take a look at boomers, some of the things that they were shaped by in their years. Civil rights, the Vietnam War, credit cards is something that shaped us, and also the economic boom. So, and as you take a look at Gen X, they were shaped by the end of the Cold War, AIDS epidemic, MTV, Walkmans. For those of you who know what Walkmans are, remember what Walkmans are. And then you take a look at our millennials too, at some of the things that they were shaped by. Also, when we look at some of those areas too for them, you take a look at a big one, a really big one that many of you will probably connect with, that 2008 crash, 9/11. So you got 9/11, 2008, that economic crash that happened, the internet, social media, and smartphones, believe it or not, smartphones. And then you go to our Gen Z, and just taking a look at what they've been shaped by too. They were shaped by that Great Recession after 2008, pandemic, climate change. So as you can see, those inform us, those shape us, our experiences, those all shape us with some of the things we have seen and experienced in our years, our birth years and moving forward. And then we don't want to forget Generation Alpha. I've mentioned them already, but they're up and coming. And in some workplaces, you may have them working there already. So I have another poll I'd like to have you take. And the question I have for you is, where do you notice, when you think about the generations, where do you notice the biggest differences between generations at work? And you'll see that you have a selection. And if you put other on the poll, feel free to put that in the chat too, just to see what people are thinking on where you see the generations and those differences at work, because they can all be they can be something that we haven't heard of before too. So let's go ahead and bring that up. Okay, good. It is showing up. It wasn't telling me it was. Perfect. All right, take your time. We got half responding. Okay. Good. All right, going once. All right, let's take a look. All right, so clearly, interesting. Two things tend to show up at the highest, which is technology and communication styles. Not surprising, not surprising at all. And a big one too are professional expectations, what people are expecting, and depending on where they are. And I can say too, as I do workshops, as I work with teams in California, and Keisha, I know you too, we probably hear a lot about that also from different companies. Feedback and management style, yes, and then career growth expectations. So yes, there are definitely some generational differences that you're seeing at work, and some things that can have an impact. And they can have an impact on how we communicate when perhaps we are differing in our points of view, our perspective. Okay. So a couple of things, as I mentioned before, we don't want to stereotype any generation. Every single one of us is unique. Every single one of us is shaped by our past career choices, our past roles, our schooling, our siblings, our parents. All of those things shape us into who we are today. And when we look at a generation and say, oh, everyone's this or everyone's that, that's not always the case. So when we take a look at generalizations, how they can help us and how they can hurt us, you want to take a look at how they help us when we get curious, when we ask questions, when we use it as a starting point. They can help when we see, just tendencies, getting to know people, understanding people. I've worked with Keisha for many, many years, and there's some things that, if you just looked at a generation that Keisha's in and some of the things that she is, how she operates, it's not all in that generation. Like I said, we play in different places, but seeing what people's tendencies are, getting to know them. But also when we look at things, asking questions. Gosh, do you do this all the time, or does this really work for you, or what do you do when this happens? But just asking questions, being curious when you're talking with someone from another generation, or when you find that you're going into a space where maybe you have different views, different points of views. Well, my point of view on things that may get me going are probably different than what they may be for you. But to asking those questions can really help, instead of assuming, oh, that group, forget about it, that they're always like that, or they're known for that. We want to get curious. We want to ask questions. And we don't want to put labels on people. We don't want to do that. We don't want to dismiss someone's perspective. And this is really important. And it works both ways. I found in a workshop I was in a while back, we had someone who was a very young worker, just getting into the workplace. And one of the things that they shared with us, and it stuck with me because I try to be very cognizant of that and not do that myself, is that they said, when I speak up in meetings, when I talk at my company, I don't feel my voice matters. I don't feel that it carries any influence because I'm new, and what do I know, right? And it was something that was really bothering this individual. So just because someone may be perhaps in one age group versus another age group, all voices matter. We don't want to dismiss that. We want to listen. We want to pay attention. And then also, we want to make sure that we have empathy when we are working with generations. And empathy is that ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, look at it from their point of view, take that time to do that. So when we have empathy absent on both sides, boy, that's the formula for miscommunication, no communication, conflict, all of that fun stuff. So thinking about generalizations, thinking about how they can help us from a curiosity standpoint, but hurt us when we stereotype, put labels, don't have empathy. And these are just some of the stereotypes that we hear about, that we see, and when we see research on this too, you'll hear the traditionalists be called also maturists, traditionalists, and also the silent generation, boomers. You'll see some stereotypes around them that boomers are self-centered, they're power-driven, they're workaholics, they're inflexible to change. And I can say, as a boomer, yes, can be workaholics, but luckily our younger generations have helped us along the way to not do it as much as we have in the past. Gen X, a stereotype about Gen X, which again, impatient, negative, no loyalty, lack focus. And look at the millennials, largest generation in the workplace, spoiled, disrespectful, self-absorbed, lack focus. And then our Gen Z, short attention span, technology dependent, high expectations. These are stereotypes. And I could share with you, and I'm sure you could share stories too, that when we see these, and if we're in that generation, we'll say, maybe some, but no, not that, not that, not that. Gen Z, as a matter of fact, we've been hearing a lot and seeing a lot about this too, where they're coming out and saying, we want connection. We don't want to just do technology. We want to see the people we work with. We need more connection because remember, some of these generations, what they've experienced, they want that. They crave that connection. So when we talk stereotypes, we want to stay away from these and assume that because someone's a boomer, they don't know technology. I know some boomers that are exceptional with technology. And I know younger generations that, really need more connection with people and not over rely on technology. We crave that as human beings. So I want to ask you a question. Can you think of a generalization that isn't yours, in your particular generation, and something that you admire about that generation? So think about a generation that isn't yours and something that you admire about that generation. Can you take just a moment and put that in the chat? Pick a generation. Okay, let's take a look here. Someone mentioned they missed their Walkman. Oh, yes. Loyalty. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? All right. Okay. Some of the things that we've heard, but what they admire about some of the generations is also just that some of the more tenured generations or the generations who have been in the workplace for some time have a lot of influence. They've worked in the workplace, they have a lot of influence, and you wonder, how did they get there? How did they earn that? That's one thing we hear a lot, especially younger workers coming into the workplace. But there are, when you think about the generations that you've experienced in your life, in your career, there are probably some things that you've picked up from them that have been very helpful for you. So with that in mind, let's talk strengths. One of the things that we believe at California Employers Association is let's focus on the strengths of people versus let's concentrate on their weaknesses. Human nature is we focus on weaknesses, we don't look at the strengths, what people bring to the party. And that goes past communications too. But when we think about the strengths that we see in the generations, take a look at some of these. And someone mentioned loyal for the silent generation. Boomers, optimistic, team players, loyal. Someone just mentioned that too. Dedicated. Gen X, adaptable. They had to be. One of the things about Gen X too is they were the latchkey kids. They were the ones that would walk home, let themselves in. My son still likes to joke about the fact that he had to walk 5 miles to and from school at 6 years old, which is not true at all. But he had to let him. That was never true. Maybe when he was 14, but that was not the case. But they were the latchkey kids. But also taking a look at millennials. Digital natives, our millennials, our Gen Zs born into technology, where in many cases we had other generations had to learn it. Also, looking at Gen Z, I mentioned earlier that connection, they really value relationships. These are strengths. These are strengths as we look at what these generations have told us in research and in surveys. These are the things that really show up for them. And when we leverage these, it goes a long way in understanding people and also in being able to communicate in a way that's healthy for everyone. One thing that we all navigated was the pandemic. That had a tremendous impact for our country, for us individually, for some of us with families. Some of us had some really tough things happen with our families with the pandemic. But it really changed us, and it impacted, didn't matter which generation you were from. And we're still navigating that pandemic as a society. So as we think about the pandemic and all that we experienced with it, I have a question for you. How did the pandemic change your relationship to work? And do you think your experience was similar to or different from colleagues in other generations? And I'd like you just, if you could, take a moment, jot that into the chat, how it changed your relationship to work. Because I can tell you from my standpoint, it really, from our company standpoint, it really opened up, even though it was a terrible time for many of us, it opened up possibilities that we really hadn't thought about. Possibilities that there were different ways to work and perhaps even work more productively and maybe even in a more flexible way. It also made us rethink how to have connections with people. When we were all on lockdown and we couldn't see or talk to anybody in person, and we had to find creative ways to do that and ways to just switch and adapt. I think about Zoom, and I wish I would have bought stock in Zoom when the pandemic hit, because I tell you, have a whole lot of money because that just changed everything for us. But you think about that question and that relationship to work and how it may have affected other generations too. So with that in mind, we're going to keep going. Feel free to jot anything in the chat that you have. We'd love to hear from you. But I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Keisha, who will take us the rest of the way as we think about navigation, communication, working with generations. So with that in mind, we are going to turn it over to my colleague, Keisha, who will take us the rest of the way on communications.
One thing that comes up for me, Jessica, when you were talking about the pandemic for us at CEA was it forced us to really adapt to all the different communication platforms that we may not have been using, that were in existence, but we might have not have been using and utilizing. We might have been a little bit hesitant about. But we were forced into it because we could no longer go on site to do our trainings. So we had to learn very rapidly how to adjust to Zoom. It led to us hiring wonderful people such as Anna, our marketing guru and webinar producer extraordinaire. So it forced us to think differently. And like you said, also connect with each other because we were working in a similar experience, all working from home remotely, and having that need to still connect with each other. So yeah, even though it seems like a long time ago, we're still.
That's so true, Keisha. And I think it brought us closer together as a team too, as an organization. And I hope that did that for a lot of you as you were navigating a really tough situation.
Yeah, and I think of again when we're looking at the different generations, that's something we shared, and some of those things brought us some excitement, some fear, some confusion, and now we have something more, which is AI, which is really transforming our workforce. Whether we're ready for it or not, whether we're already in your organization already working with it or not, it brings a lot of different types of feelings. So don't be shy. I know it's hard to share in the chat sometimes, or maybe you're multitasking. But when you think of what is your current relationship with AI at work, where are you in that mix? What are your emotions? These are things that we can connect with, regardless of our generation, because we're all experiencing it at the same time. It's new for all of us. Maybe we're coming in from a different industry who's already been utilizing it and we can share that expertise. Maybe we're in the same position as someone else and we're feeling a little threatened because a lot of companies have been using AI to do layoffs. So that will bring a shared experience in terms of, gosh, are they going to cut my position that I might share with someone of a different generation, right? So we can have those shared experiences together. Also looking at what are we going to do with it? What is our shared values within the organization, regardless of our generations? What do we want to do with AI? And how can we collectively leverage those strengths that Jessica mentioned? How can we bring in the expertise, or how can we bring in the new, fresh ideas of how do we work around it? And one comment that Jessica mentioned as well is that employees do want connection, and with the various work models that we're using in today's workforce, we don't get a lot of opportunity to meet people. We don't get those conversations around the water cooler anymore. So one way is sometimes when we're working on something new, a new project, being intentional about bringing different strengths to the table, bringing different people from different departments who can bring their expertise, who can share their knowledge with others, again, regardless of age. What is their expertise? Because again, we might use those generalizations and assume maybe that millennial has the tech savvy or that Gen Z, and maybe they don't. Maybe they're at the beginning stage as well. So how do we provide those learning opportunities for people and really have those quality conversations that we're talking about, so that we can leverage everybody's strengths and just not make assumptions or judgments and think we're all in the same boat or we're all in different boats. We definitely have some shared experiences there. Which brings us to kind of say, especially with my experience of working at CEA with employers for over 10 years, we really do want the same things at work for the most part. And some of these are listed before, and they're very important if you want to create that healthy, communicative and collaborative work environment. Respect. There isn't an employer or an employee who doesn't want that respect in a workplace. They don't want to have conflict. They don't want to have unhealthy conversations and conflicts with each other. So having that foundation of respect is really critical. We want trustworthy and accessible leaders. We want to be able to voice our opinions. As Jessica mentioned, the person at the on-site training who didn't feel heard, who didn't feel valued, that really impacts if we're doing our best work. If we're not feeling valued, if we're not feeling heard at work, we're less likely to do our 100% best at what we do. We also want learning opportunities. So this transformation, this opportunity with AI, although we may have different initial feelings about it, it's not an option anymore. It's the way the workforce is going and trending. So we want those learning opportunities to continue to stay relevant, and to stay engaged in the jobs that we hold. We may be working with people who've worked in their industry for 20, 30 years, and they want to stay engaged. They want to stay relevant. Even Jessica mentioned, people of certain generations aren't retiring yet. They want to continue. They want to bring purpose and meaning to their lives, and also contribute the knowledge that they've gained during the years that they have been working. We also want feedback, and again, all of this is also individual. So our individual differences, those life experiences that Jessica mentioned, also play a big part. So we don't want to paint everybody with the same brush, or the same generations with the same brush. We want to look at those individual needs, because some people like a lot of feedback. They want to know exactly how they're doing on a day-to-day basis, especially if they might be in a newer position. More seasoned people might want less feedback, or might not necessarily think they need feedback, but we need feedback to grow as individuals and as organizations. So these are some key things that we've listed. Are there any others that you think that is just a commonality, that when you're an employee within a business or a company, that you would want to have, that you would think we all have in common? I would say we all want to make a living wage. We all want a good salary and benefits and compensation. I think we all want a healthy work environment. But list some in the chat that you think are some commonalities that we can grow from, instead of creating that divisive environment that sometimes happens, and leads to some calls on that 800 line to us. Because one of the important reasons for that is we want to build on those similarities. When we find commonalities with each other, that creates a bond, that creates some shared values. Even if it's we both like coffee, even if it's we all like dogs. I think we discovered that during the pandemic, Jessica, that we're a dog heavy organization. At least one person has a dog.
You cat lovers, but mainly dog heavy, yes.
Yes, yeah, and cat lovers, yes, absolutely. Not dissing the cat lovers. But when you start finding that, it builds the understanding, it builds the relationship, so that you are able to communicate more effectively, and understand each other, and be more patient with each other, have some grace with each other. Because again, we are going to have different styles of working. We're going to have different expectations, and how do we navigate those together? Which leads to, how do we communicate in this multi-generational workforce? And you've heard a lot of statistics, but 81% of today's workers say the primary difference between workers is in our communication styles. So again, we may be making assumptions that all boomers want to talk in person, or they want to use the phone. But those are things that were based on when they started in the workforce, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not able to adapt to the new technology or the new communication platforms that exist. And the same with Gen Z. We might assume that they want to use all the technology and be on the instant messaging. And as Jessica mentioned, we're hearing a lot about that lack of connection. And even in terms of well-being, we're seeing a high reportage of employees from all generations feeling a sense of loneliness in the workplace. So how do we bring that connection? So we want to work on what is our different communication styles, and that can span across generations. It's just our individual styles. How do we leverage and work with those? And we already showed this, I think, earlier, but when we have those teams cross generations who can communicate effectively with each other, we're going to be more profitable, because we're probably going to have less tension in that work environment. We're going to have that healthy work environment. We're going to build those relationships. We're going to have that as one of our values, to build those relationships with the communication that we use. And relationships are built on every conversation that we have. So if we have increasingly productive, positive, effective conversations, then we're going to build solid relationships, and then we can move from there. And people are going to do their best work, right? When you don't have that tension, when you're not walking on eggshells, which hopefully not all of us have experienced, but a lot of us have, unfortunately, experienced those work environments where it's just really hard to do your best work because there's so much tension, there's so much divisiveness. So these are some best practices which aren't going to sound new, I don't think, to a lot of you, but they're such an integral part of communicating effectively across generations with our colleagues, with our vendors, with our clients, with our customers. And number one, the essential one is fostering that culture of respect. You have to have a foundation of respect. And again, I think it's something we all want. We want to come into the work environment and know that we can be heard, that what we say and what we do in terms of contributing to the organization really matters. It gives us a sense of purpose, knowing that I can respect my colleagues. It gives that sense that people have my back, they support me. So we really want to build that culture of respect and continue to reinforce what that means for your organization, because it may mean something different in different businesses and organizations. So if you are in a position of leadership, you want to reinforce that, especially if issues arise. You want to come back to it and say, hey, let's come back and define what is respect in our workplace. What does it look like? How does it show up? Another one we hear an awful lot about is how are we leveraging those different communication platforms, right? We were forced at CEA to adapt to some of these tools: Basecamp, Teams, meetings, instant messaging, more texting, virtual meetings on Zoom or Teams or different. And sometimes people get confused in terms of what should I be using with what type of communication. So we implemented the different platforms, but maybe we didn't set up procedures or standards or norms for these platforms. And so it creates a constant division, or, maybe I'm used to using Teams and Jessica's been emailing me and I haven't been receiving the emails because I've been using a different platform. That wastes some time. So then we can get frustrated, we can get confused. And then that's when our minds start rolling and we start making those assumptions that, oh, they can't use that technology or they don't want to use that technology. So how do we meet in the middle? Setting those mutual expectations. I have a niece who's a lawyer, and when she started at her law firms, I said, that first week you talk to everybody and ask them, what are their expectations of you in terms of communication? What is the best method for them to communicate with you? And she was working completely remotely. So it was really important that she establish what were the communication methods that they wanted to use. Again, seeking that feedback, asking people how things are going, having those one-on-ones, having those staff meetings where people are actually voicing their opinions, making it comfortable, making it safe for people to actually voice their concerns, their issues, their challenges before it escalates into a conflict that might actually lead to, again, calling us at CEA. We're happy to help, but we'd rather you be able to resolve those issues before they escalate, and really communicate effectively and respectfully. Listening is becoming a lost skill, but it's very powerful. When you are a good listener, and raise your hand if you're a good listener, people notice. And they're usually drawn to good listeners because they know that they're going to listen to them and understand them. And they're going to seek you out, even if you're not their manager, even if you work in a different department, because they've seen that and they want to feel heard and understood. So listening has a lot of power, especially if you're in a position of leadership, because you have that opportunity to respond to that feedback, to really listen and understand that person. And then meeting people where they are, right? We're going to have different communication styles and different work ethics. How do we share those values? How do we come up with some common standards and procedures so that we can get along? And then using clear and concise language. Whatever industry you're from, I'm sure you have different terminology than we do. I'm sure you have different abbreviations and different acronyms. And of course, with the different generations, we're always evolving with our language, using different slang. So how do we make some norms? And it's using clear and concise language that we know everybody can understand, knowing your audience, knowing who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to a customer, they might not be familiar with the terminology or the language. When I go to the doctors, they're always using different terminology, and I'm like, talk to me in basic language. So keeping that in mind, especially when you are the communicator, you want to make sure you get that message across. So that people actually understand what you're saying, not just that they're hearing it, but they're understanding the message. So here's just a little scenario that could happen, may have already happened in your organization, where a Gen Z, and I know it might be a generalization, it could happen at any generation, but a Gen Z employee sends an email message, client-facing message, using very informal language, abbreviations, a casual sign-off, and no subject line in the context. A baby boomer colleague of theirs sees the message and is concerned it reflects poorly on the team's professionalism. The Gen Z employee really feels that communication style is authentic and builds rapport. The boomer feels there are standards that exist for good reason, right? Very used to that formal way of communicating. We used to have written memos on paper that would be sent in a manila envelope. So there's just different threads that have gone amongst the generations. So seeing that setup and seeing that scenario, what would your first reaction be in terms of how they should communicate about this, or should they? What would your immediate reaction be to that email? And while you're thinking and answering in the chat, here's the example of the Gen Z email. So, hey, just looping back about the proposal. Let me know if you have questions. Thanks. And of course, they used an emoji. What would your thoughts be? Does this even need to be discussed? It's a colleague, not a manager, right? They're just observing something and having their strong perspective and opinions.
As I look at this too, Keisha, and we were talking earlier that I have a good friend who's in the boomer, and it's the reverse. The way that she does her texts now are very much like this. And sometimes I have to look at it and think, what is she trying to say to me? But in the workplace, when someone's actually representing your company, we're looking out for their best intentions. We have best intentions looking out for their reputation too, and their influence moving forward. So I'm curious if any of you have a recommendation, what you might do on this.
Yeah, and here's the suggested correction. But I can just imagine this going haywire if someone just kind of puts in their suggestion without really prefacing it, without really having that quality conversation about, hey, I noticed you sent an email to so-and-so. How do you think that went? How do you think they, received it? Maybe just kind of saying, this is how you should do it, might cause a lot of reactions, right? So we have to tread carefully. Especially when someone hasn't sought out our feedback, right? We do want feedback, but sometimes when someone just presents it to us without asking, hey, do you think I could share this with you? Something could escalate, right? But again, it's about communication style and what is the intention. There may be some things that the boomer doesn't know about the relationship with the client and the employee of Gen Z. Maybe they're really on good informal terms, right? But we want to talk about what is the intention that we want to send to that client if we don't know them. We want to kind of suss it out and again know our audience and use the appropriate. All right, so here's some other examples again where it might be just different communication style, or maybe it just hasn't been reinforced. But when we have these communication differences and we don't address them, we just make the assumptions, we just assume based on generation. We've seen it before, we've heard it before. This person just doesn't want to use this technology, then it can escalate into that conflict or into that unhealthy work environment where we're, we're making assumptions about people. We're really not resolving issues. So it could be about what platforms are we using? Again, we were forced during the pandemic to adapt to so many different platforms. Which ones are the right ones to use? And maybe it's just a conversation that we can have between colleagues. We don't necessarily have to create a whole meeting about it, just to have a conversation where we're really listening to each other. We're creating that two-way dialogue, right? Because it's a two-way street. Another one that comes up a lot is response times, not knowing when I'm supposed to get that in. What's the deadline? Again, if you're the communicator, you want to be really clear and concise in terms of, if this is urgent, I need it by end of day Friday at 5 p.m., not just, hey, can you get that to me? Right away, because right away is going to mean a lot of different things for different people. And then going back to the professionalism, is using emojis, is using emails with abbreviations and acronyms, is that professional? So maybe it's a conversation we have is what is professional communication? I know at CEA, when we're interacting with our members and employers for the first time, there's a script that we can go by. And of course, we can adapt it to our own style of conversation, but we want it to be consistent, that we're sending the same message to all of our members, that they're really hearing it and they're understanding it. So that could be a suggestion for those who may not be used to writing initial emails or any kind of interaction with a customer or a member, right? Those are those opportunities for mentoring and reverse mentoring, mutual mentoring. And then some organizations have certain hierarchy, right? Some more than others. Sometimes we come from a very formal structure of hierarchy in organizations, whether you're in the government or sometimes in healthcare, education. Sometimes there's really structured formal hierarchy that we have to adhere to that maybe we're not familiar with. Maybe we're familiar with more of that open collaboration and everybody has a good idea. So just checking, especially if you're newer to a team or a project or an organization, hey, how do we share our ideas around here? Because I'd really like to offer mine and be heard and be seen. So again, when we're not addressing these right away, which some of us don't, because we don't like conflict or we're not sure what to say, then those can escalate into, issues of conflict where maybe we're not even talking with each other. Maybe we're not even interacting because it's gotten so bad. The biggest key, which we've mentioned before, is we really want to listen. We want to create that two-way dialogue. So when we're having that conversation about what the best platforms are to use and when, we're really giving our full attention to the other person. And many of us, we're planning our response. We're planning what we're going to say. And when we're doing that, we're not really understanding what the other person is saying. So we really have to give our full attention, our focus. We've got to put all those digital devices away, really be in the present moment and be aware of the person's body language if they're feeling a little uncomfortable or awkward, and we're going to adjust to that body language. And then when they're done, then we summarize. We want to really make sure we did hear and we did understand what they said. Is this right, what I'm hearing? And really we want to be in a calm mode. So if you're not in that good mindset, then don't have the conversation. You have to be in that conversation and be ready. Once you really feel that you have heard the person and that you've clarified it, then you start using that conversation starter to respond. It's really just to keep the two-way dialogue going so that you get to that shared purpose, that mutual purpose of where to go from there. And these are just a few examples of how to use those conversation starters, right? When it may be uncomfortable or maybe a little awkward, that's when we need a little structure to the conversation. Because if we're feeling a little emotional, we might say or do something that we're going to regret. So we want to be able to structure something so that we can really focus on that and so that we can focus on keeping that two-way dialogue, because I know we've all been in that conversation where it gets a little heated and then we end up not talking at all, right? We want to keep that conversation going and in a respectful manner so that we can really understand that other person and what they're saying. So we've talked a lot about strengths, stereotypes, different challenges we're experiencing. From all this, what are we gathering about what could be the benefits of having a multi-generational workforce? What are you guys seeing and observing? Our quiet group today. They're thinking thoughtfully.
Yeah, and I'll jump in while people hopefully get a moment to chat about it too. I think about over the years when I've led teams and having just that those different perspectives, the ideas, the experiences. And what I found is people, exactly, Ashley, I see you say more creativity. That's what I see. We build on that and create some real brilliance together in reaching, our goals, our innovations, all things of that nature. It just makes, to me, it makes the world better. It makes our decisions better. It makes the workplace better. Um, I love working with diversity of thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it definitely brings diverse perspectives. We're all coming from different life experiences, right? None of us had a choice of what era we were born in. So we were exposed to different things just as a result, just by default. But we can share those perspectives and experiences with each other, and get to make decisions faster when we have that diversity of thought. When people bring something in, it may be diversity of thought of coming from a different industry or a different organization, and learning different things. Also, that ability to share our knowledge. I will never forget. Prior to CEA, I worked in a shopping center, and my oldest employee was 78, the youngest was 16. And the oldest employee, who was 78, had used to be a travel agent for Fortune 500 companies. So her phone etiquette was just, I mean, ultimate. It was just immaculate. And so she trained the 16-year-old on how to use the phone and how to have that professional etiquette. And it started with, structuring some conversations, creating some scripts so that the 16-year-old could become familiar. And then vice versa, the 16-year-old shared any knowledge that she had with technology and computers and doing things a little more efficiently or faster. So it was a win-win. It becomes a win-win for your environment if you can share that knowledge with each other. We already mentioned innovation, creativity, having a different awareness of different clients, different customers, different members. We work with so many different employers at CEA, and we can connect based on our mutual experiences. And all of us at CEA have different perspectives, so we can bring that into the multiple industries that we serve. Obviously, having more people, two heads is better than one. We're able to, resolve our problems, especially if we've created that really safe environment for our employees to be able to say, hey, I do have an issue. I do have a challenge. I need some help. I need some support. And just again, going back to that example of people having different experience and different skills with how they relate to customers and how they handle situations and issues. So really, it's about the communication. It's about building those relationships so we can leverage those strengths and we can minimize those assumptions and judgments that we make that creep into our conversations. I always hear them when I go on site. They'll say, "Oh, old timer," make some comments, and people will laugh. But really, we want to minimize those and really, value each other and what they're bringing in terms of contribution to the organization.
I
So
have a great
a lot.
comment here. Did you see
Yeah.
the comment from Niana here? It's excellent too. Niana mentions we create a team that can handle any and all incoming clients of all ages when you're able to have direction and feel free to speak up. So very true. She also says she needs help from a young person to help her make her screen work, Keisha.
Yeah, I mean, we were sharing stories before we even started about what we're good at, what we're not good at, what we need help with, kind of removing those egos a little bit too, and admitting, hey, I don't have as much experience with that as someone else. And it can be across generations for sure. We all know something that someone else doesn't. As we wrap this up, we know you came here for a reason. You wanted to hear about generations and conversations. Improvement happens and is most likely when we name an action that we're going to attach to that. So was there a refresher? Was there a reminder? Or was there something new that made you pause and think, gosh, I really need to put that into action? Or I have been doing a little more judging lately. Maybe I need to, not assume as much and really find out the answers and the facts. And I'm going to let you decide what you're going to commit to. What are you going to put into practice today that will really strengthen that multi-generational working relationship, especially as it relates to communication. And I'm going to even give you some possible answers in a poll. So let's see what you come up with. We're going to hold you to it. What is something you're committed to doing or taking action on that you heard either from your peers that are on the chat or from either of us, Jessica or myself, or something else that you just want to add in the chat? All right. Okay, now you've added it in a poll, so you've got to take action on it.
It's in writing now, right?
It's in writing. Yeah, everybody's seeing it. Well, they will see it in a second. Going on strong. Start with one, right? I'm sure we could all use improvement in all of these areas, but start with one thing. What's the most important? All right, 78% avoid stereotyping other generations. It's automatic, it's normal, it's human. Our brain is hardwired to make those assumptions and judgments, especially when we see it reinforced on social media and other outlets. But we are all individuals, so we want to take people for who they are as individuals and learn more about them. So that's a great one to start with. Then actively listen, again, put down those devices. Really be present in the moment, and that will go a long way. That will give a lot of influence. And then tied, the rest are all tied. So setting clear expectations, mentoring, learning from the different generations, which was mentioned, and practicing patience, because we are all unique. Excellent. Thank you all for your participation today. That was wonderful. And we will wrap it up and pass the baton back over to Anna, our webinar producer extraordinaire.
You're too kind. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Just here to provide you with the support that you need to, do your thing, my dear. So I did just drop a link into the chat. I know you're here for codes and those are on the screen, but I do want to make sure I get your attention on what I just put into the chat. That is coming up on April 28th. This is a very exciting in-person event hosted again by Riverside County. This is going to be in Indio. 7:30 to 11:30 a.m. And we are so pleased to offer 2 different complimentary workshops during this this day. It's going to be hire right the first time as well as communicate like a leader. So we've got kind of a mix of compliance and some essential skills, some leadership skills. We really encourage you to click on that link and consider marking your calendar, registering to join us in person for that. As you can see on your screen, we do have some continuing education credits for you. So your HRCI good today, 735366. SHRM code is 26-DDHAM. Our colleague Eli Nunez always has a cute little saying for the acronym, and I just don't have that for you today. So you're just going to have to attend another one where he is able to wow you with his creativity. But I do also want to direct your attention over to the chat one more time because I do have that survey, as you see on the screen. You can click on the link in the chat, or you can scan that QR code for your convenience, whatever adventure you choose. We hope that you'll take a minute and share your feedback with us. It's only 5 questions, but it really does help us continue to help you with additional resources. So with that, I really do want to say thank you again to Jessica, to Keisha for leading us today with this amazing presentation that I hope gets the ball rolling and on continuing to improve yourself and your workplace. Thank you all for joining us today and for being so engaged with the polls and in the chat. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you next month at that in-person half-day workshop session on April 28th. Look for an email from me after we wrap up today with the PDF of that slide deck as promised, and we'll see you next month for more. Thank you all. Cheers.